The Galactic Council Chamber had hosted tyrants, prophets, saviors, and war criminals. It had heard the cries of dying civilizations and ratified the birth of 1,000 more. But never, not once in its long, storied existence, had the chamber debated fear as a diplomatic principle. Until now, it started with an irregularity, a report, a few ships lost in uncharted sectors. Normally, that was no cause for alarm. But then came the footage, grainy, corrupted, yet unmistakable. A human destroyer flanked by an unknown vessel of brutal, organic design. The two ships had not fired on the alien patrols. They hadn't transmitted warnings or demands. They simply appeared, watched, and vanished. Silent, deliberate. The Council's analysts debated the footage. The strange craft's heat signature mirrored that of a Class 12 Deathworld environment, lethal to all known sapients. And the human vessel, despite outdated systems, had moved in a pattern that suggested artificial gravity manipulation beyond Tier 4 capability. That was the first alarm. The second came days later, when the same pair of vessels arrived on the edge of the Kiver trade ring and demanded entry, not with threats, but with protocols so perfect, so calm, it chilled the diplomats. They hadn't asked permission. They'd informed. In emergency session, the Council called upon its defense assembly, intelligence scribes, and even the oracles of the VA-Tren archives. All agreed Earth was no longer acting alone. Humanity had allied with another Deathworld species, one that made even humans look conservative. The alliance was new, unstable perhaps, but more terrifying for its novelty. The Raskari were still poorly understood, officially classified as pre-diplomatic. Their species had shown no interest in formal contact until recently. Their first interaction had been an intercepted transmission during a skirmish between human privateers and a mercenary fleet. A human captain had transmitted an open frequency call for assistance. The Raskari had responded, not with words, but by rending the mercenary fleet apart in minutes, using gravitational claws and raw kinetic bombardment. Afterward, they left without acknowledgement. That single act was enough to elevate them to critical status in every known database. No known species should have been able to manipulate dark matter fields without massive generators. The Raskari, apparently, used their own bodies. Earth's directorate denied formal military cooperation, but confirmed diplomatic exchanges were underway. When pressed, human diplomats smiled and said nothing. That silence, across all channels, was interpreted by the Council as a challenge. No threats, no demands. Just the unspoken message, we don't need to explain. The Council couldn't let that stand. So they extended the invitation, an emergency summit on neutral ground, with full rights of representation. It was officially an offer of open dialogue. Unofficially, it was a containment strategy. The delegation was selected carefully. The human representative, Commander Alaric Reeves, veteran of the 5th Saturn conflict, recipient of the Iron Black Medal for Valor, and former instructor at the Human-Terran Strategic Corps. Fluent in 10 languages, including Council-signed Standard and Raskari battle glyphs. The Raskari delegate was harder to classify. Kahal, known only by title and deed. No records of his origin. No confirmed translation of his role. But intelligence agencies called him a warrior monk, which was close enough. He'd walked alone through radiation storms that crippled drones and hunted predators that metabolized lead. Their ship arrived without escort. No honor guard. No fleet. A silent wedge of metal and bone that docked with the orbital ring above the Council world, as if it had always belonged there. Station control attempted to override its approach pattern. The ship ignored them and landed flawlessly. Reeves exited first, dressed not in ceremonial robes, but in a matte black uniform marked only by a single insignia, a downward-pointing blade framed by stars. His stride was calm, measured, his expression unreadable. He walked like a man who knew the ground would move if he asked. Kahal followed, towering, even beside a tall human, covered in layered exoskeletal armor that seemed to shift texture depending on the light. No visible weapons. None needed. His presence was a weapon. They said nothing as they entered the Council chamber. No greetings. No shows of deference. They simply stood side by side, silent as the room adjusted to their presence. Counselors whispered in hushed tones. Even species without vocal cords used gesture and pulse signals to express their discomfort. One delegate from the Zeltran Compact transmitted a private message to her homeworld. They aren't here to negotiate. They're here to watch us squirm. The High Chair spoke first, an elderly Voxari with 6 centuries of political experience. His voice, augmented to cross-language comprehension, echoed through the chamber. Welcome, delegates. We gathered today to ensure stability. There's concern, deep concern, about recent events, about alliances formed without council knowledge, about unilateral actions that suggest disregard for a cooperative protocol. Reeves inclined his head slightly. We appreciate the concern. That was all he said. Kyle made a clicking sound, perhaps amusement, perhaps something else entirely. The High Chair hesitated. You do not deny the alliance? Reeves answered, we don't deny survival. That sentence rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. A counselor from the Avix hegemony demanded clarification. Are you suggesting that your actions were defensive? That disrupting entire sectors was an act of restraint? Kyle responded this time, voice deep and guttural. The translation system hesitated before speaking his words. If we had acted without restraint, there would be no sectors left to discuss. Another silence, this one heavier. A delegate from the Kren Consortium tried to regain control. Surely you understand the implications of independent military movements. The Council exists to preserve balance, Reeves interrupted. We agree. Then why disrupt it? We didn't. We corrected it. The chamber buzzed with nervous biosignals and digital chatter. The Raskari delegate, still motionless, added, when a predator arrives in the meadow, the grass does not protest. It bends. It wasn't a threat. Not directly. But dozens of species registered elevated stress markers in the following seconds. The High Chair cleared his throat. Commander Reeves, your species was extended provisional membership to encourage integration, not posturing. We're not posturing, Reeves replied. We're informing. Of what? That your assumptions about peace are flawed. The tension grew tangible. The ambassador from the then collective, a civilization famed for psychological analysis, leaned forward. Please elaborate. Reeves didn't blink. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of deterrence. You believed Earth would integrate quietly, that we'd adopt your norms. But you invited a species forged in atmospheric fire, shaped by planetary predators, and tempered by nuclear near extinction. You expected us to submit to bureaucracy. Word of the Council encounter spread faster than light, fractured into speculation, fear, and desperate reassessments of strategy. Species with ancient war records quietly elevated alert levels. Empires with legacies of conquest began immediate reviews of Deathworld classifications. The humans in Raskari hadn't issued threats, but they hadn't needed to. The message had been delivered in posture and presence, in precision and calm. Entire intelligence agencies began poring over every second of the encounter. They found no aggression, only dominance. Among the first to respond was the Varn Axis, whose territory bordered the volatile drift regions where human Raskari activity had first been sighted. Their surveillance fleets reported increasing patrols, but the patterns didn't match conventional strategies. The humans weren't claiming territory. They were mapping silence. Isolated systems, derelict stations, asteroid fields no species had touched in centuries. When questioned, they cited strategic curiosity. Privately, the Varn commander sent encrypted signals to the Council. This is not expansion. This is preemption. What followed was not military escalation. It was philosophical panic. Because the Deathworlders hadn't challenged the Council militarily, they'd rendered it irrelevant. For centuries, diplomacy had been framed as balance. Weighted power, mutual dependency, and slow consensus. But humans and Raskari operated by different principles. Power to them was not balanced. It was wielded. The Council's Behavioral Insight Wing issued a formal report. It didn't use inflammatory language. It simply concluded that both species had developed evolutionary frameworks where conflict was not an anomaly. It was a constant, not just biologically, but culturally, psychologically, even spiritually. The document concluded with one understated line. These are not civilizations preparing for peace. These are civilizations evolved to endure its collapse. A week after council meeting, a joint task force made contact with a hidden Raskari structure buried beneath a gas giant's moon. The facility appeared to be ancient, predating even human written history. The gravity patterns around it twisted scanners. When approached, it transmitted one message on an open channel. Observed. The meaning was debated for days. It didn't translate as a threat. It was a fact. Humanity and the Raskari weren't trying to intimidate the galaxy. They were simply watching, waiting, studying every pattern, every gesture, every reaction. The observers had become the observed. Council species began altering patrol routes. Defense budgets surged, but more unsettling were the changes in thought. Entire populations began questioning assumptions they'd long held, that cooperation guaranteed safety, that consensus equaled power, that peace was the pinnacle of civilization. The humans hadn't disproven these ideas. They had simply walked in and ignored them. That indifference was more destabilizing than any weapon. On Earth, the Directorate issued a rare public address. It didn't acknowledge the Council's concerns. Instead, it announced the launch of the Outrider Accord, a loosely defined initiative meant to promote exploration, joint resilience training, and cross-environmental survival protocols. Only one species was included as a founding partner, the Raskari Dominion. The Council sent 3 formal queries. None were answered. The Council Security Concordance met in private session to review contingency measures. In hushed tones, they discussed theoretical strike plans, neural suppression bombs, orbital sterilization, kinetic extinction protocols. But none of the plans were ever formalized, because every scenario ended the same way: mutual destruction. The humans had built redundancy into chaos. The Raskari thrived in it. Fear began shifting into something more dangerous: doubt. One council species, the Trana Hive Synod, attempted a diplomatic gambit. They invited human and Raskari liaisons to a cultural demonstration, a week-long exchange of history, music, and philosophical engagement. The goal was subtle manipulation. Show them beauty, reason, harmony. The assumption was that even Deathworlders could be softened. Both delegates accepted the invitation. Both arrived on time. And both sat unblinking as the Synod presented its proudest cultural works: layered pheromone operas, logic-based harmonic constructs, and a motion-mapped art designed to evoke cross-species empathy. At the end, Reeves asked a single question. What did this cost to defend? The Synod stuttered. Excuse me? Cahal clarified. You built beauty atop comfort. Where are the weapons beneath? The Synod proudly declared there were none. That was the point. Reeves didn't smile. Then it won't last. The exchange ended with polite words, but the damage was done. The Synod's Hive memory updated its evaluation of humanity from unstable ally to catalyst species. Other species took notice. On the edge of known space, a pirate coalition long immune to council enforcement attempted to intercept a joint human Raskari convoy, rumored to be carrying classified experimental tech. They deployed 20 ships, fusion warheads, ion nets. The convoy responded by jamming all sensors within a 1,000-kilometer radius, deploying drones that emitted false fleet signatures, and then vanishing. Moments later, every pirate vessel experienced spontaneous life support system failure, localized, precise, and unexplained. 2 days later, fragments of the pirate flagship arrived at the nearest neutral station. Attached was a recording. No warning, no demands, no survivors. The pirate coalition disbanded within the hour. In response, fringe species began reaching out to humans, not to negotiate, but to request inclusion. Not alliances, but lessons. How to survive collapse. How to think beyond diplomacy. Earth didn't respond directly. Instead, they released a publicly accessible archive titled Resilience Doctrine. It contained no blueprints, no strategies, just principles. Prepare before you are threatened. Act before you are challenged. Survive before you are accepted. Endure even when forgotten. It was not a manifesto. It was a creed. The council called an emergency session, not to discuss war, but identity. The debate wasn't whether the humans were dangerous. It was whether the council still mattered. The Raskari issued their first official statement through a unified translation relay. The message was 3 words: "We remain awake." To some, it meant vigilance. To others, it meant warning. But to the most ancient species, those who remember galactic dark ages, it meant something else entirely. The predators are watching. The then collective sent covert envoys to Earth's Outrider Accord, requesting silent participation in the resilience initiatives, not for military gain, for survival psychology. The humans allowed it, quietly, without acknowledgement. Then the unexpected happened. A supermassive stellar anomaly destabilized the Council line system. The star began emitting unpredictable radiation pulses. Evacuation was deemed impossible under Council protocols. Calculations showed a 92% loss of life. "We do not need thanks,"